At 2:14 in the morning, with my best suit wrinkled from pacing and a marriage license folded inside my jacket, I stood outside Nora Hayes' apartment door and did the most desperate thing I had ever done. I knocked on the door of the woman I had spent 8 years pretending I did not miss. When she opened it, she was barefoot, wearing an old gray cardigan over a coffee-stained t-shirt, her dark hair twisted into a tired knot. She looked at my suit, then at my face, then at the license in my hand. "Nathan," she said quietly, "someone better be dead." "No," I said, my throat dry. "But by 9 o'clock, my grandfather's house will be." Her eyes narrowed. "That doesn't explain why you're on my doorstep in the middle of the night." I held out the paper like it was a confession. "I need a wife by morning." For 3 seconds, the hallway was so silent I could hear the old elevator groan behind me. Then Nora laughed once, not because it was funny, but because it was too absurd to answer. "You need sleep," she said, and started to close the door. I put my palm against the frame. "Nora, please. I wouldn't be here if there was anyone else." That was the wrong thing to say. Her hand froze on the door. Her tired eyes changed, going sharp in a way I deserved. "No," she said. "You wouldn't be here if there were anyone easier. If you've ever had one desperate choice change the rest of your life, stay with me. And if you believe a marriage can start as a deal and still become something real, like this story and tell me in the comments whether you would have said yes." I should have walked away then. A decent man would have apologized and left her in peace. But desperation has a way of dressing selfishness up as duty, and I had been raised by a family that made duty sound holy. My grandfather, Henry Reed, had built Reed House on the edge of Wilmington, North Carolina, long before the riverfront became expensive. It had started as a boarding house for shipyard workers, then a shelter after Hurricane Fran, then a place where half the town seemed to have eaten a holiday meal when money got tight. To my grandfather, Reed House was not real estate. It was a promise with walls. When he died, his will gave the property to a family trust with one ridiculous condition. A Reed descendant had to be living there, married, and willing to operate the charity wing by the final review date. My grandfather had believed unmarried men in our family ran from responsibility. He was wrong in the general sense, but in my case, he may have had evidence. For 6 months, I had been engaged to Mallory Price, a woman my family liked because she made every room look arranged. We were never a love story. We were a calendar item that smiled well in photographs. She knew the terms. I knew the terms. We both told ourselves adults made sensible choices all the time. Then, at 11:37, the night before the review, Mallory left her ring in a water glass beside a note with 11 words. "I can't be your costume for a life you won't live." She was right. That did not make the timing any less catastrophic. At 9 that morning, the trust committee would meet with the county judge, the foundation attorney, and my Uncle Graham, who had already lined up a developer to turn Reed House into luxury apartments. If I failed the condition, Graham would gain control by default. The West Wing shelter would close. The free kitchen would close. The small legal clinic that Nora had fought to bring back to life would never open. That last part was why I knew where to find her. Nora had returned to Wilmington 3 months earlier with a non-profit badge, 2 boxes of donated law books, and a reputation my family had helped ruin. 8 years before, she had worked for the Reed Foundation. She was 24 then, brilliant, stubborn, and always carrying 3 notebooks like the world might fall apart if she failed to write it down. I was 28, newly in charge of operations, and too proud to admit I listened harder when she spoke. Then $50,000 vanished from a fundraiser account. My Uncle Graham found transfer forms with Nora's initials on them. I believed what I was shown. I did not ask the questions I should have asked. Nora resigned before the police were called. She left town. And I let my silence stand in for judgment. Now she stood in front of me, older, calmer, and less willing to bleed for people who called it loyalty. "You're serious," she said. "Yes." "Mallory?" "Gone." Nora's eyes flickered. Not with satisfaction, not with pity. With understanding, maybe. Or maybe I only wanted to see that. "And you came to me because the trust language only says married," she said. "Not happily, not honestly, just married. It says legally married, resident, and committed to operating the charity wing. Committed." She repeated the word like it tasted bad. Funny word, coming from a Reed. I lowered my hand from the doorframe. "I know I have no right to ask. That has never stopped your family. I took that because it was true." She looked past me at the empty hallway. Her apartment building smelled like rain on brick and burned coffee. Somewhere behind her, a desk lamp glowed over stacks of folders. I saw the corner of a cot, not a sofa, and a pair of heels lined up beside work boots. Nora never had one job when 3 would do. "If I say no," she asked, "what happens to the East Wing? The committee leases it to Graham's developer until the sale is final. And the clinic? Gone. The women who were supposed to meet there next week? I don't know." Her jaw tightened. That was the first time I saw the battle move inside her. She did not care about me enough to ruin her life, but she cared about people she had not even met enough to consider it. "No romance," she said. The words hit me so directly that I almost stepped back. "I'm not asking for that. I'm making sure you hear me. No romance for show, no touching my waist at breakfast, no kisses to convince old ladies, no smiling at each other like we have some sweet story. We don't." Agreed. She opened the door wider, but not to invite me in, to stand taller, separate bedrooms. "Of course, a prenup before the ceremony. It's almost 3 in the morning. You have lawyers who answer when rich men panic. Again, fair." "Done," I said. "I leave with nothing that belongs to you. Not money, not stock, not the house, but the East Wing gets a 10-year lease to Harbor Light Legal Aid for $1 a year, signed before I take a vow." I stared at her. "That's what you want? That's one thing." "One thing?" Her face did not soften. "At breakfast in front of your family, you tell them I did not steal from the Reed Foundation." My stomach turned cold. "Nora, no. Not later. Not after you find proof. Not after you ask Graham for permission to grow a spine. You say you were wrong to believe it. You say there was never an audit, never a police report, never a confession. You say your family let a rumor do what evidence couldn't. I could have argued. 8 years of pride rose up out of habit. But beneath it was the memory of Nora standing in the old foundation office with tears in her eyes, saying, "Ask why your uncle found exactly what he needed exactly when he needed it." I had not asked. "All right," I said. Her expression changed then. Not relief. Surprised that I had not fought harder. "And the last condition?" I asked. She folded her arms over the old cardigan. "If you ever decide this marriage is more than a document, you tell me before you tell anyone else. You don't perform devotion in public and hide confusion in private. I will not be used as a prop twice. That condition should not have shocked me more than the lease or the public confession. But it did. Maybe because money was simple. Reputation, painful but deserved. Separate rooms, obvious. But she was asking for honesty before there was anything to be honest about. She was warning me that a heart could be another kind of contract, and she would not sign one written in invisible ink. I nodded. "You have my word." "No," Nora said, reaching for her keys. "I'll have your signature." At 6:40 a.m., we stood in a courthouse side room with beige walls, fluorescent lights, and a clerk named Denise who clearly had seen stranger things before breakfast. My attorney served as one witness. Nora's friend Tessa, a nurse who arrived still in scrubs, served as the other. She looked me over once and said to Nora, "Blink twice if this is a hostage situation." The ceremony lasted 7 minutes. I remember almost none of the legal words. I remember Nora's hand in mine. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. I remember the small pause before she said, "I do," not hesitant enough to stop the room, but long enough to remind me she was choosing with her eyes open. When it was my turn, I looked at her and felt the full weight of what I had asked. "I do," I said. The clerk pronounced us married without music, flowers, or applause. Nora signed her name as Nora Hayes, not Nora Reed. I did not ask why. I already knew. A name was not a favor she owed me. Outside the courthouse, morning had spread pale gold over the river. Commuters hurried past us with paper cups and laptop bags, unaware that my life had just been rearranged by a woman holding a manila folder instead of a bouquet. After Tessa left, Nora turned to me. "Breakfast? My family will be at the house by 8. Then let's go disappoint them early." I almost smiled. Almost. We moved into the dining room, where 10 members of my family sat around the long table pretending not to stare. My grandfather's chair at the head remained empty. Graham had wanted to sit there after the funeral. I had moved it against the wall and told him the chair was retired. It was one of the few brave things I had done before Nora came back. The foundation attorney, Mr. Bell, sat beside a stack of binders. Judge Whitcomb would join by video at 9. We had 53 minutes to look like something other than a midnight accident. Graham recovered first. This is an obvious attempt to manipulate the trust. "The trust requires a legal marriage," my attorney said from behind me. "The marriage is legal." Graham ignored him. "To a woman who stole from this foundation." The room went still. I felt Nora beside me, not moving, not flinching. That stillness was worse than tears. It told me she had expected the blow and trained herself not to show the bruise. My first instinct was the old one. Manage the room, delay, say something neutral until I had proof. But I had signed my name beneath her condition. More than that, I had seen the truth of it. I had let my family use uncertainty as a weapon because certainty would have cost me something. I pulled out a chair for Nora. She did not sit. I did not sit either. "Nora Hayes did not steal from the Reed Foundation," I said. Caroline's hand flew to her necklace. Graham's face hardened. "You don't know that. I know there was never an audit completed. I know no police report was filed. I know the only documents ever shown to me came through you. And I know I was wrong to let suspicion become a sentence." Nora looked at me then. Just once. Her eyes were unreadable, but the tight line of her mouth eased a fraction. Blake said, "So we're just rewriting history because you married her?" "No," I said. "We're correcting it because it should have been corrected 8 years ago." Graham leaned forward. "Convenient." "Yes, Nora said, her voice calm. "The truth often becomes inconvenient when it arrives late." That was the first moment I saw my family understand that Nora was not there to be rescued. She was there armed with patience, paper, and a memory sharper than anyone's comfort. The hearing lasted 34 minutes. Graham argued the marriage was rushed. The judge said the trust did not define romance. Graham argued the lease was suspicious. Nora explained the legal aid plan with numbers, referrals, volunteer attorneys, security improvements, and a 6-month operating schedule. By the time she finished, even Caroline was taking notes. At 9:41, Judge Whitcomb granted temporary compliance pending a 90-day review. Reed House stayed in my control. The East Wing lease was entered into record. The developer's option froze. I should have felt victorious. Instead, when the screen went black, all I felt was the woman beside me exhale as if she had been holding her breath for 8 years. I turned to her. "Thank you." She gathered her folder. "Don't thank me yet. Temporary compliance means Graham has 90 days to prove we're a fraud, incompetent, or both. You think he'll try?" Nora looked towards the hallway where my uncle had disappeared. "Men like Graham don't lose property. They misplace obstacles. That afternoon, I found her in the carriage house, standing beneath rafters furred with dust, her cardigan sleeves pushed up, a flashlight in one hand. The place smelled like damp wood, rusted hinges, and old paper. Graffiti marked one wall from years when neighborhood kids had used it as shelter from rain. In the corner, a broken desk lay on its side. That was how my marriage began. Not with a honeymoon, but with my wife handing me a dust mask and telling me to stop looking ornamental. For the next week, Reed House became 2 houses layered inside each other. In public, it was the family estate under review, full of relatives dropping by to assess the scandal. In private, it was a construction zone where Nora and I worked until midnight clearing debris, calling electricians, sorting donated furniture, and arguing about paint colors that both looked white to me. "They are not the same," she said one night, holding up 2 swatches. "They are both white. One is warm. It's paint, not a person." She stared at me. I took the swatches. "This one has emotional availability." Against her will, she laughed. It was small and quick, gone almost before I could enjoy it. But the sound changed the room. For a second, dust and suspicion and legal deadlines gave way to something lighter. I understood then why people chase laughter in hard places. It feels like proof that damage did not get the last word. I started learning her rhythms. She drank tea when thinking, coffee when angry, and water when she was too tired to admit either. She hated being interrupted, but forgave it if the interruption came with food. She spoke gently to clients on the phone, then hung up and looked ready to fight a bank with her bare hands. She never entered the kitchen without washing whatever dish was in the sink, even if it was mine. That was when trouble began. Not because we broke the rules, but because I started understanding why she had written them. Dinner was at Graham's condo overlooking the marina, all glass, chrome, and art that looked expensive because it refused to explain itself. Carolyn came. Blake and his wife came. Mr. Bell came, which told me the dinner was not dinner. It was strategy with salad forks. At the table, Graham spoke about unity, family legacy, public perception. Nora listened with the patience of a woman counting exits. I watched my uncle's hands. He had a habit of touching his cufflinks when he lied. By the main course, his fingers had gone to them 4 times. "Nora," he said eventually, "surely you understand why some of us are concerned. A sudden marriage, a valuable trust, your prior history with the foundation." "My prior history," she said, "is that I worked 80-hour weeks for half the salary and left with no charges filed, because Henry was merciful." At my grandfather's name, her fork stopped. I looked at Graham. "Don't." He smiled. "I'm only saying Father chose not to pursue the matter, out of kindness." Nora set her fork down. Henry Reed did not pursue the matter because he knew I didn't take the money. The table changed. It was almost physical, like the air had tightened. Graham's smile thinned. "That is quite a claim. It's a fact." "Then why leave?" Nora looked at me. "Not long. Just enough to make my chest tighten. because the person who should have asked me to stay didn't. No one spoke. I had spent 8 years thinking Nora left because guilt made flight easier. Sitting there, under the cold glow of Graham's chandelier, I finally considered the simpler, uglier possibility. She left because innocence had not protected her, and I had been part of the danger. I stood inside near enough to hear if voices rose, far enough not to insult her. Graham spoke low. Nora answered lower. I caught only fragments. Temporary arrangement. Name your number. Think of your future. Then Nora's voice, clear as glass. The difference between you and me, Graham, is that I know exactly what my name costs. She did not. He said he had copies of the old transfer forms. He said if I pushed too hard, they would find their way to the review committee. Let him send them. Her eyes cut to mine. You haven't seen them. I should have. 8 years ago. The elevator descended in silence. Then she said, Henry had a red ledger. My grandfather? He kept handwritten notes. Donations, cash deposits, restricted funds, everything. He didn't trust software. That sounded exactly like him. Where is it? I don't know. Why didn't you tell me before? Because last time I told you where to look, you looked at Graham instead. The words hurt because they were clean. No exaggeration, no cruelty, just truth placed where I could not step around it. 2 weeks later, the first threat arrived in a white envelope with no return address. Inside were copies of the old transfer forms. Nora's initials appeared beside 3 withdrawals. At the bottom was a sticky note. End the lease. Annul the marriage, or the committee sees who she is. Nora read it once, handed it to me, and went very still. These are copies, I said. They'll be enough for people who already want to believe them. Not for me. Her eyes lifted. I stepped closer, then stopped before I entered space I had no right to assume. Not ever again. When the accusation happened, she said, I had a letter from Henry. I turned. What letter? He wrote it the day before everything blew up. He said he knew something was wrong with the fundraiser accounts and asked me to bring the red ledger to him after the gala. I had it in my desk. By morning, the ledger was gone, the transfer forms were on Graham's desk, and everyone was looking at me. Why didn't you show me the letter? I tried. Her voice stayed even, which somehow made it worse. You were in the conference room with Graham. I waited outside. You came out, looked right through me, and said, Not now, Nora. The memory returned like a slap. I had been angry, embarrassed, afraid of scandal. She had stood there holding an envelope. I had not even asked what it was. I still have it, she said, because a letter saying Henry trusted me is not proof that Graham framed me, and because part of me was too proud to beg people to believe I wasn't a thief. That sentence stayed with me. The next morning, I called every retired employee who had worked the fundraiser. One name kept coming up. Miss Alma Ruiz, my grandfather's bookkeeper, who had moved to a retirement community outside Raleigh. She was 81, suspicious of cell phones, and apparently still angry that my grandfather had once bought cheap coffee for the office. Miss Alma met us in a sunroom full of ferns and crossword puzzles. She was tiny, sharp-eyed, and wearing red lipstick at 10 in the morning. When I introduced myself, she said, You have Henry's eyebrows and none of his patience. Nora smiled for the first time all day. When we explained the ledger, Miss Alma's face changed. I told Henry not to keep only 1 copy, she said. You saw it? I asked. I wrote half of it. Nora leaned forward. Do you know where it went? Miss Alma looked at her for a long moment. I know you didn't take that money, child. Nora's hands tightened in her lap. I told them, Miss Alma continued. I told Graham those forms were wrong. He said I was confused. Then he moved me out of the office before the auditors came. What auditors? I asked. The ones he canceled. My pulse picked up. Can you testify to that? At my age, young man, I can testify to anything I remember and a few things I don't. But yes, she pushed herself up from the chair and shuffled to a cabinet. From a folder marked Recipes, she pulled out a photocopied page covered in my grandfather's handwriting. I kept this because Henry asked me to mail it if anything happened to him. Then he died years later, and I thought the fight was over. The page showed the withdrawals Graham had blamed on Nora. Beside each one, in my grandfather's handwriting, was a notation. Transfer requested by G.R. Hold for verification. Do not process. G.R. Graham Reed. Nora stared at the page. She did not cry. She looked like someone afraid to believe rescue could arrive after the drowning. Mr. Bell arrived near noon with a grim expression. Graham filed an emergency challenge, he said. Of course he had. On the petition, Graham claimed our marriage was fraudulent, Nora's lease was self-dealing, and her documented financial misconduct made her unfit to operate any charity program on Reed property. He requested immediate suspension of the lease and review of my trusteeship. The hearing was set for Friday. Friday morning, we walked into the county hearing room without holding hands. Graham sat with his lawyer and a folder thick enough to suggest confidence. Carolyn sat behind us. Tessa sat beside her in scrubs. Miss Alma had insisted on coming and wore the red lipstick like war paint. Graham's lawyer argued first. He painted me as desperate, Nora as opportunistic, and our marriage as a paper wall built to block lawful transfer. Some of what he said was ugly. Some of it was uncomfortably close to the truth. We had married quickly. We had signed contracts. We had separate rooms. Then he said Nora had a history of theft. I felt her inhale beside me. When it was our turn, my attorney began with the documents. The signed lease, the prenup, the operating schedule, the volunteer rosters, the clinic intake reports, the trust language. Then he called Miss Alma. She walked to the front with a cane, sat down, and dismantled 8 years of lies in 12 minutes. She testified that Graham had requested the suspicious transfers. She testified that my grandfather had halted them. She testified that Graham canceled the independent audit after Henry fell ill. Then she handed over the photocopied ledger page and 3 notes in my grandfather's hand. Graham's face lost color. Then Judge Whitcomb asked me the question I had known was coming. Mr. Reed, did you marry Ms. Hayes primarily to satisfy the trust condition? The room went silent. My attorney shifted beside me. Graham's eyes sharpened. Nora's hand remained in mine, but she did not squeeze. She would not guide me toward the easier answer. Yes, I said. A murmur moved through the benches. The judge looked over his glasses. You understand that answer may damage your position? Yes, Your Honor. And do you consider this a real marriage? I looked at Nora. Not for permission. For truth. It became real the moment she made me sign conditions I should have been living by already, I said. Separate rooms, because respect matters. A prenup, because power should not hide inside romance. A lease for the clinic, because this house was built to serve people, not my pride. And a public correction of the lie my family told about her, because no marriage can be real if it depends on a woman swallowing the truth. Nora's eyes shone, but she did not look away. I turned back to the judge. I needed a wife by morning. That part is true, but I do not need a lie today. If the court decides I failed the spirit of the trust, I will accept that. I only ask that you do not punish the clinic for my failure, and that you do not let Graham Reed use forged suspicion to take what my grandfather meant to protect. For the first time since I had known him, Graham looked truly afraid. 3 days ago, I reviewed archived correspondence from Henry Reed's personal safe deposit inventory. There was a sealed instruction that had not been transferred into the trust file. I opened it this morning. He handed a letter to the clerk. The judge read it silently, then aloud. If any member of this family uses Nora Hayes' name to bury misconduct, look to Graham before you look to her. She has more honor than most people born into mine. Caroline began to cry. I closed my eyes. Nora's hand went slack in mine. For a terrifying second, I thought she might faint. But she only sat there, breathing through the shock of being defended by a dead man when the living had failed her. Judge Whitcomb recessed for 20 minutes. In the hallway, reporters from the local paper had already gathered. Graham's challenge had become public the moment he filed it, and scandal moves faster than dignity. Nora stood near a window, pale and silent. I approached slowly. Are you all right? No. Do you want water? No. Do you want me to leave you alone? She looked at me then. No. So I stayed. After a minute, she said, I thought if I ever heard proof, I'd feel free. You don't? I feel angry and sad and tired. She pressed her fingers to her eyes. And I hate that Henry trusted me more than you did. There it was. The wound beneath the case. Not money, not reputation. Me. I hate it too, I said. Don't say the right thing because we're in a courthouse. I'm saying it because I love you. The words left me before fear could dress them up. Nora went still. I remembered her condition too late and exactly on time. Tell me before you tell anyone else. I'm not saying that to keep the house, I said. I'm not saying it because you're hurt. I'm not saying it because guilt got confused. I love you because you tell the truth when it costs you, because you build doors where my family built walls, because you made me want to become the kind of man who could ask for your hand without needing a deadline. Her eyes filled. I know the contract says 6 months, I continued. I'll honor it. I know your room has a lock. I'm glad it does. I know you can leave with nothing from me, and if that's what you choose, I'll carry your boxes to the car and spend the rest of my life grateful you made me honest before you left. But you told me that if this became more than a document, I had to tell you first. My voice broke. So I'm telling you first. For a long moment, Nora said nothing. People moved around us. A door opened. Someone called Graham's name. The world continued, rude and ordinary, while my whole life waited on her breath. Then she said, You are the most inconvenient man I have ever married. A laugh came out of me, half broken. She wiped one tear with the heel of her hand. I don't know what I feel yet. I know. No, listen to me. I care about you, more than I planned, more than is practical. But I am still angry. I am still learning whether the part of me that trusts you is brave or just tired. I'll wait. I'm not asking you to wait like a martyr. I know. I'm asking you to keep showing up when there's no emergency. That was the condition beneath all the others. Not a lease, not a prenup, not separate rooms. Consistency. I can do that, I said. You'd better, she whispered. When the hearing resumed, Judge Whitcomb ruled that Graham's challenge had revealed credible evidence of his own misconduct. He referred the matter for investigation, suspended Graham's authority in all foundation decisions, and confirmed Reed House under my temporary trusteeship with a special condition. The legal aid clinic would continue operating independently, regardless of any future dispute over the residence. Nora closed her eyes. We had won, but not the way I expected. I had gone into that morning trying to prove the marriage was strong enough to save the house. Instead, the truth saved the house from needing our marriage to be a lie. The next 90 days did not turn into a fairy tale. That is not how real repair works. Graham's investigation dragged through lawyers and accountants. Reporters called. Donors asked careful questions. Some relatives apologized. Others waited to see which side would become safer. Nora kept working. The clinic filled faster than any of us expected. On Mondays, volunteer lawyers handled landlord disputes. Tuesdays became debt negotiation nights. Thursdays were for family court preparation. The kitchen reopened on weekends, and Caroline, to everyone's astonishment, became terrifyingly good at managing donated casseroles. Nora stayed in the blue room. I stayed in mine. Some nights we talked on the porch until the mosquitoes drove us inside. Some nights she closed her door early, and I learned not to take healing personally. Once, during a thunderstorm, the power went out while we were reviewing grant applications. I lit candles in the kitchen. She looked at me across the table and said, "This feels like a scene where someone makes a bad decision. We moved slowly because she deserved slowly, because I did too, though it took me longer to admit." I had spent years confusing urgency with meaning. Nora taught me that trust is built in the mornings after, not the midnight crisis. On the last day of the 90-day review, Judge Whitcomb approved the long-term trust plan. Reed House would remain a family-operated service property. Harbor Light Legal Aid received a renewable 20-year lease. Graham resigned from the foundation before he could be removed. The developer withdrew. That evening, the house filled with people. Volunteers, clients, neighbors, my aunt, Miss Alma, Tessa, half the retired attorneys in 3 counties, and children running down halls my grandfather would have pretended to scold them for using. Someone played music in the courtyard. Someone else burned the first tray of biscuits and blamed the oven. Nora stood near the carriage house doors, watching the clinic sign being mounted. Harbor Light. Legal Aid, East Wing of Reed House. No mention of my name. No mention of hers. She had insisted on that. I walked up beside her. "Looks good. It looks real. It is real." She glanced at me. A lot of things started that way lately. I smiled. "Careful. That sounded almost sentimental. Don't ruin it." We stood shoulder to shoulder as the sign settled into place. My hand brushed hers. Not by accident, not quite by request. She looked down, then threaded her fingers through mine. I did not move. I barely breathed. "You can hold my hand in public, Nathan," she said softly. "We've testified under oath. I think people can handle fingers." Later, after everyone left and the house finally quieted, I found Nora in the kitchen washing coffee mugs. The same kitchen where she had signed the prenup at 3 a.m. The same island where our marriage had begun as a stack of defensive paper. "You know," I said, picking up a towel, "we have staff for this. We have volunteers. And you have 2 hands." "Yes, ma'am." We washed in comfortable silence. Outside, the courtyard lights glowed against the windows. The house no longer felt like a museum. It breathed again. Nora dried the last mug and set it on the shelf. Then she turned to me. I read the 6-month clause again. My heart kicked once. "All right." It says either party may request a review of marital terms after 6 months. It does. We are at 3. I can count. She stepped closer. I don't want to wait 3 more months to say this. The towel twisted in my hands. "I'm still angry about the past," she said. "Not every day, not all the time. But sometimes. I need you to know that." "I do, and I still want my room. You'll always have any room you want. And I am not changing my name because your aunt already monogrammed towels. I'll burn them respectfully." Her mouth trembled into a smile. Then the smile faded into something more fragile. "But I love you," she said. Not because you needed me. I think I started loving you when you stopped needing me to be easy. I had imagined, in weak moments, what it might feel like to hear her say those words. I had always imagined relief. Instead, I felt humbled, almost painfully. Loved by Nora did not feel like winning. It felt like being trusted with something alive. I set the towel down. "May I kiss you?" I asked. Her eyes warmed. Yes, the kiss was not dramatic. No thunder, no swelling music, no family walking in at the worst possible moment. It was gentle, careful, and certain. Her hand rested against my chest, and mine touched her face like I was learning the shape of grace. For once in my life, nothing about the moment was urgent. Nothing had to be proven by morning. When we pulled apart, she whispered, "That was not in the contract. I'll ask my attorney to draft an amendment." She laughed against my shoulder, and I held her because she leaned first. In the morning, sunlight filled Reed House the way it used to when my grandfather was alive. Nora was in the kitchen before me, wearing my old blue shirt over her jeans and reading grant notes while toast cooled beside her. Her plant sat in the east window. I stopped in the doorway. She looked up. "What?" "Nothing." "That is never true with you." I crossed the kitchen and kissed her forehead because she tilted it toward me. "I was just thinking about the morning after." "After what?" "After I thought everything would be decided by 9 o'clock. She closed the folder. "Was it?" "No," I said. "That was only the deadline. This is the decision." Outside, the clinic door opened. Voices rose from the courtyard. Someone laughed. Somewhere in the house, pipes knocked, old floors creaked, and life moved through rooms that had almost been emptied forever. Nora handed me a piece of toast. "Eat," she said. "You get dramatic when hungry." "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, and I understood something my grandfather's will had tried and failed to teach me. A house is not saved by a married man. A house is saved by people who choose what kind of love gets to live inside it. I had needed a wife by morning, but Nora had needed conditions because she understood what I did not. The right person does not ask you to give up your boundaries to prove love. The right person makes you grateful they had boundaries strong enough to lead you both home. And every morning after that, I chose her before the crisis, before the crowd, before the house, before pride. Not because a document required it, because she did. So tell me honestly, if someone who once failed, you came back desperate, would you give them a second chance if they were finally willing to tell the truth? Share your answer in the comments. And if this story touched you, subscribe for more emotional love stories about trust, forgiveness, and the choices that change a life.